Hello everyone, I am Sean. Today I am so happy because the autumn sunshine outside is bright, which makes me feel peaceful and relaxed. I hope my good mood can be conveyed to you through my voice so that you can also enter today's study with a positive attitude. Autumn is a season that I really like. It is a mature season and even the sunshine is gentle and inclusive, not as aggressive as in summer. The development of our self-concept is also like the changing seasons, a gradual process of maturation. On the path of maturing our self-concept, it is inevitable that we may fall into the pit of immaturity situation, leading to a sense of helplessness and leakage. In today's class, I will talk to you about the common ways we respond to our unsatisfactory selves and our psychological defense mechanisms on the path of self-growth. I will also discuss how these defense mechanisms deeply influence the construction of our self-concept. Understanding and mastering these psychological aspects will be the latest knowledge I require you to acquire in this lesson. I have a student from my offline lesson and he once told me about his story with his mother. Since he was little boy, his mother's education style was always negatives and rarely praising him. He learns things more slowly, like making foods. Even after practicing many times, he still don't look good. His mother would say, "You've been practicing for so long and still can't make them properly. You never use your brain when learning anything. Look at what you're doing, it's a mess." This series of criticism has led to him not enjoying making foods anymore. My student believes that making foods is just a small example and that many reasons for his lack of confidence in life come from being criticized and not receiving affirmation during childhood. He always feels that he's not good enough. Criticism is necessary in life, but if you grow up constantly being negated, you may become afraid to showcase yourself and believe that you're not good enough. I can really understand the student's feelings. Undoubtedly, in his mother's education, her evaluation of him has formed deeply ingrained beliefs about himself, that he's not good enough, that he can't do anything well, and that he learns things slowly. It's like a curse that continues into adulthood, causing him to be dissatisfied with himself, resulting in a lack of self-confidence and even feelings of inferiority. In the psychology, there is a school of thought called psychoanalysis, which advocates finding the root causes of problems in childhood trauma. Therefore, tracing back to our growth, the inappropriate behavior of parents during the education process and the harm and blows from the outside world become popular ways for many people to study psychology to solve their own negative states. The reason why this root cause approach is popular is because we easily attribute our dissatisfaction with life and dissatisfaction with ourselves to others. This process of attribution gives us a sense of relief. Now I finally know that today's terrible situation is because of the way my parents educated me. However, similar stories often have opposite versions. I have a good work partner whom I will refer to as A. He grew up in constant conflict with his mother, who primarily criticized and scolded him. Even in his 30s, he still gets kicked out of the house after arguing with his mother with his 2 children and escape into the office. When we see this scene, we tease him saying, "Oh, you got kicked out again. Looks like it's tough, right?" But his self-concept development is a different version. He often self-deprecates or jokes others. He also expresses strong self-confidence in areas where he has control. In areas where he is not good, he is also willing to admit that he doesn't know or understand, and in interpersonal relationships he shows strong adaptability and flexibility. From these behaviors, it is not difficult to see that he is a person who knows and accepts himself clearly and is very confident. In fact, the friend I mentioned earlier, his childhood growth process was similar. His mother was very capable, so from an early age, her expectations of him were very high. Therefore, being criticized, scolded, and hit by his mother was a common occurrence. In the later grades of elementary school, he was even criticized by his teacher for being too flashy in his dressing, which caused him great emotional distress. But as an adult, he still developed a mature self-concept, gained self-confidence and emotional intelligence, and achieved a satisfactory life. In the previous lesson, I mentioned that adolescence is an important turning point in the development of our self-concept. Before adolescence, our self-concept formation highly depends on the evaluations of others, especially our parents and teachers. How does the evaluation of others affect the formation of our self-concept? Returning to the story of my friend I mentioned today, when his mother criticized him during the process of making foods, it caused him to avoid making foods. He said that if his mother had praised him more and showed more support, he would have practiced more, and as a result, he would be better at it now. Avoidance is the most common coping mechanism we use in childhood when our self is under attack. It is a psychological defense mechanism that protects ourselves from harm. Psychological defense mechanisms are the learned ways we deal with setbacks in life. Their function is to alleviate our psychological conflicts and eliminate anxiety. Our self-concept is like the plane we stand on. When we encounter setbacks, we essentially feel that our self is being impacted and this plane becomes unstable. We have a fear of falling, so we instinctively protect the plane we stand on to avoid getting hurt. Therefore, we automatically activate psychological defense mechanisms. In childhood, we have many psychological defense mechanisms such as avoidance, self-deception, psychological defense, and aggressive psychological defenses. They are like warm clothes we wear to feel safe and warm. On one Tuesday morning, because I came back late from a business trip the day before, I woke up late. Before I even got out of bed, I heard my daughter crying and saying, "Ma, it's all because of you that I'll be late and now I'm going to be scolded." Then I heard sobbing accompanied by the sound of the door closing heavily. I felt that my daughter hurriedly ran out of the house and rushed to school. My daughter is someone who is afraid of being late because being late means being called out and criticized by her teacher. For a child who is entering adolescence and increasingly concerned about face, this is an embarrassing situation. So when she realized that she was going to be late in a state of haste and anger, she instinctively blamed her ma, thinking that it was because of the breakfast that she ate for too long and wasted time. Obviously, in the matter of being late, my daughter finds it difficult to face the awkward situation after being late. This triggers her psychological defense mechanism to protect herself, and she uses the defense mechanism of blaming others. She thinks, "Look, I'm going to be late not because of me, but because of ma'am." This rationalization allows her to avoid taking responsibility for her lateness, thus avoiding facing her unsatisfactory self. Rationalization belongs to the self-deceptive defense mechanism in psychological defense mechanisms. In addition to making excuses, children also use many other psychological defense mechanisms. I remember when my daughter was around 3 years old, there was a time during a family gathering when she accidentally broke a bowl. In that moment, she immediately crawled under the table and hid herself behind the long tablecloth, refusing to respond no matter how much I called her. By avoiding looking at the scene of her mistake, she convinced herself that she hadn't made any mistake. This is a very typical example of evasive psychological defense mechanism. There are also these scenarios that everyone must be very familiar with, such as when a child falls and feels embarrassed, they instinctively start punching and kicking their mom, crying loudly and persistently. Another example is when a group of children are playing together and one strong child is laughed at by others because of some words or action. They might instinctively kick the weaker child in order to relieve their own feelings of embarrassment and anger. In these scenarios, children are using aggressive psychological defense mechanisms. In childhood, we adopt these psychological defense mechanisms because our self-evaluation is based on the evaluation of others. Positive feedback from others makes us feel happy and self-affirmed, while negative feedback leads to frustration and triggers a series of self-protective psychological defense actions. These defense actions, although they help us restore psychological balance when our minds are not yet fully mature, can also have negative implications. They can cause us to avoid and retreat when faced with pressure, restricting our personal growth. Whether it's avoiding responsibilities or blaming others for being late, the focus is not on improving our abilities but solely on protecting ourselves from external evaluations. Just as we outgrow our childhood clothes as our bodies growing, our psychological defense mechanisms also need to be updated and gradually replaced with more mature ones. This is a crucial task in our self-development process. It is difficult to expect our younger selves to have mature defense mechanisms like adults. So, the various immature psychological defense mechanisms I mentioned earlier are actually normal for children. However, when we become adults and continue to use immature defense mechanisms from childhood, it becomes problematic. It's like wearing clothes from our childhood when we have grown up, which would seem childish and inappropriate. Similarly, if we continue to use childish defense mechanisms as adults, our self-development will be delayed. I have a student who is a beautiful and she is around 30 and an entrepreneur. Let's call her Miss B. In our communication, she expressed her inner fears and anxieties. Since graduating, she has been working in high-end education and training for about 3 years. On the surface, she appears to be a very accomplished and confident woman, but throughout our conversations, I have consistently sensed a lack of self-acceptance. Beneath her proud exterior, there resides an insecure little girl. She is the second child in her family, and second children are generally overlooked by their parents. In her childhood, her academic performance was never outstanding compared to her older brother, which made her feel inferior. Throughout her growth, she yearned for her mother's attention and was willing to do anything to seek her approval. For example, when she found herself on stage performing or hosting, shining under the spotlight, her mother would show a proud look. So, she would always strive to maintain the confidence and arrogance of a host in order to gain recognition. This pattern of relying heavily on external recognition to establish a sense of self has continued to this day. She mentioned that she still cares a lot about the opinions of important people to her, so her focus is always on the outside, hoping to meet the needs of others. Even if she doesn't want to do or can't do these things, she is unwilling to refuse. Because she values the opinions of others, she often tends to escape when faced with challenging situations. She believes that although she has strong expressive abilities, her practical skills are weak, which makes her feel insecure and lacking confidence. The more she feels insecure, the more she tries to appear glamorous and maintain her arrogance. She uses her excellent expressive abilities to control the focus in communication in order to gain external recognition and fill her own insecurities. In her story, whether it is the way she constructs her self-concept or the way she deals with stress or setbacks, she is very much like a child. She uses arrogance to cover up her inferiority and allows her superior expression to cover up her other shortcomings. This reverse effect belongs to another type of avoidance-type psychological defense mechanism and is also an immature defense mechanism. This defense mechanism hollows out her self-concept, so if there is no external affirmation or the shine of being the center of attention, she cannot find herself. The lack of an upgraded psychological defense mechanism has affected her ability to face her true self and construct an upgraded self-concept, further locking her into using those immature defense mechanisms to protect her weakened and immature self. In the process of our self-concept development, why do individuals performing differently in similar educational environments and experiences? It is because at crucial stages of development, individuals may have successfully upgraded their ways of constructing self-concepts and psychological defense mechanisms. In the past, parents and teachers have had a significant influence on the way we were educated and how our self-concepts were formed. However, we also play an important role in the development of our self-concepts. As we grow older, we are able to employ more mature psychological defense mechanisms to deal with our dissatisfaction with ourselves. Just like what my student mentioned, as he grew up, he became skilled at making foods, which means we can break free from the self-concepts formed in childhood and successfully establish new ones through growth and learning. By attempting various things we want to do, we can establish new self-concepts. We can redefine our ability to make foods and other aspects of our abilities, which allows us to gradually overcome our lack of confidence from childhood. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, my work colleague mentioned how she also managed to overcome the influence of her mother. During adolescence, she achieved the independence of her self-personality through rebellion. Everything she did was what she wanted to do, and her own evaluation guided her self-acceptance. The feedback from the outside world or her mother's harsh criticism was humorously digested by her using a more mature psychological defense mechanism. Through setting goals for herself and striving to achieve them, she would evaluate herself. This closed-loop process gradually develops a mature self-concept in adulthood, and self-assurance becomes the basis for spiritual and personality independence. After the individual's adolescence, self-evaluation begins to participate in the construction of self-concepts. At this moment, we can start using our own perspective to examine ourselves and upgrade our psychological defense mechanisms to truly protect ourselves with new armor. Generally, when we are adults, we should take charge of constructing our own self-concept. This requires us to use more mature psychological defense mechanisms in order to accept feedback from the outside world. Only then can we continuously optimize ourselves, promote personal growth and maturity, and achieve our goals. During this stage of life, it is important for us to have a clear understanding of ourselves and to accept and identify with our goals. So, what should we specifically do during this crucial stage from adolescence to adulthood in order to upgrade ourselves? First, we should start by taking control of our own self-evaluation. I consider what kind of person I want to be, what kind of person I can become, and how I evaluate my own actions. Establishing a closed loop for setting goals, implementing them, and evaluating them is an important first step in rebuilding our self-concept. Just like the advice I gave to Miss B, who is proud on the outside but insecure on the inside, if she wants to overcome this sense of self-emptiness, the first step is to set a goal that she wants to achieve. This goal should be unrelated to other people's expectations, and she must give her full effort to achieve it. The successful completion of the goal will then establish our self-evaluation and form our self-identity. When lacking confidence, individuals tend to set higher, idealized goals for themselves. Therefore, reducing the difficulty of the goals and strengthening their achievability is the key to correcting inner insecurity. Next, when it comes to setbacks, we should focus on improving our self-abilities rather than seeing setbacks as an attack on ourselves. This requires us to separate our self-evaluation from the events. For example, when we were young, if we were criticized by our mother for not making foods well, we might think of ourselves as stupid and not good enough. However, as we grow up, if we fail to do something well at work, we should not consider ourselves as a terrible person. Instead, we should identify the abilities that we lacked in that particular event. This is where our growth lies. In the process of helping individuals explore their personal growth, I have always emphasized the responsibility of the self. It is true that factors such as who our parents are and the environment we are born into have a significant influence on the construction of our self-concept. However, we cannot avoid the dominant responsibility we have as adults in promoting our own growth. The immature psychological defense mechanisms that protected us in our childhood played a certain protective role in our growth, allowing our psyche to remain balanced. But as we enter adulthood, we need more mature psychological defense mechanisms that help us focus on problem solving. Insecurity or arrogance is a manifestation of immature self-concept development, while being unable to control emotions is another manifestation of immaturity. In the next class, I will lead everyone to understand the secrets behind emotional control. Welcome everyone to continue sharing your thoughts with me. Our next lesson is coming soon.